Hello friends, welcome to your channel. Today we will learn about one important cells organelle called mitochondria. So you might already know that mitochondria is called the powerhouse of cell. So you can guess that within the mitochondria the energy is produced within the cell. We know that plants can make their own foods using carbon dioxide, water and sunlight through a process called photosynthesis. But we cannot make our own food. That's why we need to take food from outside of our body. So the foods that we consume can be divided into three categories broadly. The first category can be carbohydrates. That is the main energy source within our body. Second category can be fat or the lipids and proteins. So these carbohydrates, fat, proteins, these are actually very big compounds. So they need to be broken down into smaller compounds so that our body can absorb them. So once we eat them in our digestive system, they get digested and broken down into smaller unit. Carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, fats or lipids are broken down into glycerol and fatty acid, and proteins are broken down into amino acid. Now glucose, glycerol, fatty acid and amino acids, they are ready to be absorbed in our stomach. So they get absorbed and enter the blood circulation, and through blood circulation they are transported to the cell in our body. So inside the cells, they are further broken down so that energy is produced and cells can use that energy. The process by which these organic compounds are broken down and energy is produced is called cellular respiration. We will call it cellular respiration. This is a process through which organic compounds are broken down and energy is produced. This cellular respiration can be completed in presence of oxygen or in absence of oxygen. If this process happens in presence or with the help of oxygen, we will call it aerobic respiration, and if it happens in absence of oxygen, then we will call it anaerobic respiration. In aerobic respiration, these compounds are broken down into carbon dioxide, CO2, water, H2O, and energy. Energy can be heat energy or in the form of ATP. We will learn about ATP in details later. Right now, you remember that ATP is an energy form or energy. This is a compound, ATP is a compound, but it can generate energy if this is broken down. So this aerobic cellular respiration happens inside mitochondria. So far we have learned about cellular respiration, and it can be two types, aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic respiration happens inside the mitochondria to generate energy that cells can utilize. Let's learn about the discovery of the mitochondria. So in 1857, Albert Kolliker first observed some organelles inside the cells. He found that these organelles inside the muscle cells. And later in 1886, Richard Altman found that with some exceptions, in most of the cells, have these kind of organelles, he called them bioblast or the living parasite. He called them living parasite or bioblast, living parasite. Then he proposed that these parasites live inside of our cells and participate crucial cellular functions. Later in 1898, Carl Vanda named them as mitochondria. The word mitochondria came from two Greek words. One is mitos and another one is chondros. The word mitos means thread and chondros means granule or grain. Now let's learn about the origin of mitochondria. There are several theories on origin of mitochondria. The most accepted or widely known theories is called endosymbiosis. You might already know the symbiosis. Symbiosis is a relationship between two organisms where organisms help each other and coexist. One of the simple example of symbiosis is gut microbiota or intestinal flora. We know in our gastrointestinal tract there is a area called intestine, and in that intestine there are hundreds of bacteria living there. Almost more than 250 kinds of bacteria live in intestine. We also call them intestinal flora or the simply gut microbiota. So we have a symbiotic relationship with gut microbiota. How does gut microbiota help us? It's simple. Um, Gut microbiota help us to develop our immunity. If any pathogenic bacteria enter our body, then this gut microbiota kill those pathogenic bacteria and help us. Second, it also helps to digest some foods like fibers. Digestion of fibers are done by gut microbiota. And our brain function is also dependent on gut microbiota. We will learn in future in details how gut microbiota affect the brain function or some brain related diseases. So our brain functions are closely connected with gut microbiota. And how we help gut microbiota? We give a gut microbiota optimal pH, optimal temperature for their survival, and also we give them nutrition. The food that we eat, some portion of that food also consumed by gut microbiota. So we give them nutrition, we give them optimal pH, temperature that is required for their survival. So this is called symbiosis. So similar theory, endosymbiosis in endosymbiotic uh, relationship theory, many years ago, like millions and millions years ago, the eukaryotic cell or the ancient form of eukaryotic cell engulfed one prokaryotic cell or the ancient form of the prokaryotic cell like bacteria like cell. We already know the definition of the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. Eukaryotic cell is a cell where the nucleus is well defined. Eukaryotic cells have well defined or well structured nucleus. On the other hand, prokaryotic cell does not have a well-defined nucleus. Rather, the nuclear material is present in the cytoplasm. So what happens once eukaryotic cell or ancient form of the eukaryotic cell engulfed a prokaryotic cell, as you can see in figure number 2, one eukaryotic cell is engulfing or swallowing one prokaryotic cell. Later, this eukaryotic cell did not kill the prokaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cell is capable of utilizing oxygen to break down the organic compounds for generating energy. So a symbiotic relationship formed between these two cells. This prokaryotic cell utilized oxygen and utilize oxygen and break down the organic compounds to generate energy, and that energy can be utilized by this eukaryotic cell. In return, this eukaryotic cell provides protection from the surroundings. So this prokaryotic cell get the protection. On the other hand, this eukaryotic cell gets the energy. Later, through evolution, this prokaryotic cell developed into present-day mitochondria. That is the endosymbiosis theory, that present-day mitochondria is a transformed form of a ancient prokaryotic cell or bacteria-like prokaryotic cell. So what are the proofs? So scientists have provided some proof for this theory. So one of the proof is the bacterial DNA and the mitochondria also have its own DNA. We call them mitoDNA. Bacterial DNA, there is a huge similarity between these two. That is the one proof that mitochondria was an ancient form of bacteria or bacteria-like prokaryotic cell, because mitochondrial DNA and bacterial DNA has very much similarity. Second, the inner membrane of bacteria has electron transport chain. Through this electron transport chain, bacteria can use oxygen to generate energy. Similarly, the inner membrane of mitochondria also have similar kind of electron transport chain through which energy is generated. So these are the two main proof behind the endosymbiosis theory. Now let's learn the number of the mitochondria. The number of the mitochondria per cell depends on the location of the cell and the amount of the energy they need or the amount of the work they perform. And mitochondria is considered a dynamic in nature. It means they can change their shape at any time, and also they can change their numbers inside a cell. If for a particular time lot of energy are required to produce, then there will be much more mitochondria number will be required, right? In that case, mitochondria can divide themselves and then increase their number. So this is going to be the simple process called fission. Through this process, one mitochondria can be simply divided into two, as like bacteria, and then from 2 to 4, like this binary fission or binary fission. And similarly, if there is a requirement to decrease the number of the mitochondria, two mitochondria can fuse together. For example, this mitochondria can fuse together and then make one. Two can fuse together and become one. Similarly, this process we will called fusion. Through fusion, mitochondria can decrease their number. Let's give one. So in our body, these numbers, mitochondria number per cell can be zero and also can be hundreds of thousands. For example, in blood, we have red blood cells or RBC, we called it simply. And you know that RBC or red blood cell does not have any nucleus. They also do not have any mitochondria inside of them. One adult RBC or red blood cell does not have any mitochondria and also does not have any nucleus. On the other hand, hepatocyte, these are the liver cells. So these hepatocyte also need to work. They need to work a lot in compared to the other organs. So they have like a much more higher mitochondria number. Their mitochondria number per cell can be 1,000 to 2,000. And on the other hand, you know, like the heart muscles, heart all the time pump blood, so they are working 24 by 7, right? So cardiomyocyte or the heart muscle cells, they need a lot of energies, and so they also need to produce a lot of energy, and they need more mitochondria to generate more energy. So their numbers, mitochondria numbers in cardiomyocyte can be like 5,000 to 8,000. Very interestingly, a human egg cell, they can have like 100,000, 100,000 to 600,000 mitochondria per egg cell. On the other hand, human sperm can have 50 to 75 mitochondria per sperm cell. So these two are very interesting fact. In future, we will know details how these numbers affect the mitochondrial DNA in our cells. So these numbers actually gonna affect the mitochondrial DNA inside of our cell. Right now, just remember that human egg cells have lot mitochondria compared to the human sperm. Now let's dive into structure of mitochondria. As we know that mitochondria have like double membrane structure or double membrane organelle inside the cell. And let's draw outer membrane. This is, let's consider this is the outer membrane of the mitochondria. And this outer membrane of the mitochondria is not folded. Let's call it outer membrane. Outer membrane. So if we zoom in some portion of the outer membrane, you will see these are actually composed of phospholipid and proteins. So you know the one lipid is represented like that. These two are fatty acid chain. So it's actually bilayer. So two lipid compound actually face like this. Their lipid fatty acid chains actually face each other and form lipid bilayer. This is called lipid bilayer. So outer membrane is made of lipid bilayer. So they also have a protein in the membrane, and proteins actually form this kind of channel. We will call this channel as a porine. And again lipid bilayer start and give them fatty acid chain facing each other. Okay, and we will call this protein channel, or we'll call them porine. P-O-R-I-N, porine. And due to the presence of this protein channel, ions and small proteins can cross this membrane easily. So remember, this is very important point that due to the presence of these porins, ions, the small compounds and other compounds, and the small protein also can cross this membrane easily. On the other hand, the inner membrane is actually folded inside. This is the inner membrane, and you can see these are actually folded inside. There will be a lot of this kind of folding. So this is the inner membrane. Inner membrane, and each of the fold are called cristae. So you can ask that why this inner membrane is folded. The reason behind this is very simple: to increase the surface area. So if the inner membrane is folded inside, then it increases the surface area of the membrane. Why is it required? If the surface area increase, then it can accommodate more proteins. That's what they need. This inner membrane has unusually very high number of proteins compared to the outer membrane. They have more proteins, so they can generate more energy, because actual energy formation happens in the inner membrane. So they need more proteins to accommodate. That's why they need more surface area. Let's give it an example. If we have this kind of straight membrane, not folded, and let's see they are accommodating some protein. So here 3 protein, 4, 5 and 6. And with the same space, if we have membrane folded like this, and then you can see the surface area has been increased a lot, so it can now accommodate lot of proteins compared to the that above one, right? So the folding actually increases the surface area of the inner membrane. And this the composition of the inner membrane, also the lipid bilayer. So let's draw a lipid bilayer. But they don't have this kind of channel to easily transport the small proteins or the ions. So they are actually very restricted for the ions and proteins. So this is the phospholipid bilayer, and they also have a lot of proteins, but they are very much restricted for the ions and the proteins. And one thing to remember, to form the cristae or the inner folding, this lipid bilayer need to be bent, right? So this lipid bilayer has a special lipid bilayer called cardiolipin, and due to the presence of this cardiolipin, this folding is possible to form the cristae. So due to the presence of cardiolipin, cristae can be formed, or the folding of the inner membrane can be possible due to the presence of cardiolipin. These are the special kind of phospholipid. And the jelly-like substance that is surrounded by the, this is the jelly-like uh, substance that is surrounded by the inner membrane is called matrix. So we will call the inner substance or the jelly-like substance of the mitochondria matrix. So we will call them matrix. And can you guess the composition of the matrix? As we mentioned that the fatty acid, glycerol, amino acid, and glucose, they are broken down and generate energy, right? So the majority part of these breakdown procedures needs a biochemical reaction, right? This breakdown of the food particles or the food compounds, they are actually biochemical reaction. And majority part of the biochemical reaction happens in the matrix. So they need, what do they need for the biochemical reaction? Enzymes, right? So matrix has lot of enzymes. So in the matrix they have lot of enzymes to help in biochemical reaction. And very interesting point is we know that our cell has a well-defined nucleus, and inside of the nucleus we have chromosome, and chromosome has the DNA. Very interestingly, mitochondria has its own DNA called mitochondrial DNA. They are like bacterial DNA likes. They are like circular DNA, and their numbers can be 2 to 10 per mitochondria. So mitochondria has its own DNA as like bacteria, and their DNA also bacteria like DNA. So they are numbered, they are called mitochondrial DNA or simply mito-DNA. Their numbers per mitochondria can be 2 to 10. Next, we know that to synthesize protein, we need ribosome, right? We know that in our cell we have rough endoplasmic reticulum, and in rough endoplasmic reticulum there are some circular substance, right? So they actually synthesize protein. Since mitochondria also there are some protein synthesis also happen, very little amount that is done in ribosome. So matrix also has like this compounds called ribosome in the matrix. So these are ribosome. So this is ribosome or ribosome. They actually do the synthesis of the protein. But remember, for all the biochemical reactions that happens inside the mitochondria, more than 95% proteins or enzymes are synthesized outside of the mitochondria, and later they get transported inside the mitochondria through small polypeptide. We'll know this in details later. Right now, remember that the most of the proteins that you find inside the mitochondria are synthesized outside of the mitochondria. So I think that's all for structure of the mitochondria. So let's summarize. So it is a double membrane structure. It has outer membrane, no folding, but it has porins. and through these porins, ions and small proteins can cross easily. And the inner membrane is folded, and these foldings are called cristae. Oh, the another important thing I forgot to mention that in inner membrane there are some small tennis racket-like structure. They are called oxysome. So you will find a lot of this kind of small structures. They are called oxysome. So we will call them oxysome. We will learn this in details later. So we will learn later that inner membrane of the mitochondria have lot of protein complexes, and one of the protein complex is oxysome. We will call them, we actually call them complex 5. We will know it later. Right now, just remember in inner membrane there are some tennis racket like structure. Um, these are called oxysome. So in oxysome, actually, the final stage of ATP production happens. So in oxys, that's why oxysome is also called ATP synthesis, because in this ATP synthesis happens there. ATP synthesis. I think that's all for the structure of the mitochondria. Now let's learn functions of the mitochondria. You might already know that already I have explained that the cellular respiration and not the anaerobic, only the aerobic respiration part happens inside the mitochondria. So this is the main function of the mitochondria, that through cellular aerobic respiration, mitochondria generate energy. And second function, another important function can be apoptosis. It means like apoptosis is a procedure or the signaling procedures through which mitochondria can kill a cell. If one cell become damaged or become detrimental to the other surrounding cells, then mitochondria can kill that cell through a process called apoptosis. This is actually helpful for us. For example, if one cell become cancerous and can affect other neighboring cells, then what does mitochondria do? Mitochondrion can start a process called apoptosis, through which it can kill that harmful cell or the already damaged cell, so that it cannot harm the other neighboring cells. And the third function can be calcium balance. Mitochondria can store calcium inside of the mitochondria, and for a biochemical process of for a biochemical reaction, if calcium is required, that it can supply calcium through release of calcium from inside of the mitochondria, and that's how it actually maintain the calcium balance. And we will know in future that this ATP formation reaction actually lot of electron transfer happens. So transport of the electrons are required in that process. And during the transport of the electron, that electron can be leaked and can form some reactive oxygen species. This is actually harmful for our body. If we have lot of reactive oxygen species, then it's gonna harm the cell. We'll learn it later, but right now remember that mitochondria can form reactive oxygen species. These are harmful for our cell. That's all today. Thank you so much. Please subscribe this channel if you like the video, and also share this with your friends. Thank you so much. I appreciate. Bye bye.